Go ahead.
Okay, you asked me the question. I know.
About great grandpa Charles.
Charles Holland, you
Yeah.
have about his father's death, right? You've already got that.
Well, I've got his birth and death, and
Okay.
but what was he like as a person? What was he like dealing with?
He loved the family. They had Christmas at their house every year because he had no Christmas growing up. He had an orange every year when he was a little boy. That's it. And he took his family and moved to Detroit, Michigan when the kids were very little and worked at the Ford factory. So the kids went to school up there. They would come back here in the summer and they would make fun of their northern brogue accent. They'd pick up, they were talking like Yankees and they got made fun of, but they liked it up there. Then they moved back to Kentucky where all the family lived. He was a deacon in the Baptist church. He never missed a service in church with his family. To him, Christmas Eve was fireworks. They didn't shoot fireworks on the 4th of July. It was Christmas Eve, and all the grandkids would go outside and they'd have, yes.
Interesting.
Uh-huh.
Did he ever?
And
explain
some
why?
of them still do that in their yards, have fireworks on Christmas Eve.
What did he ever explain why?
That's the way it was when he was a little boy.
Interesting.
They didn't sell them in Kentucky, so he'd drive over to Missouri and get a lot of fireworks, bring them back. And that was a tradition at his house for many years.
Did he ever talk about his childhood?
Not very much, just that he worked for a farmer from 9 years up, but he had a third grade education, but he had his own, he's a paint contractor and hired men and painted all kinds of homes and businesses. So he was a smart man. He did his own income tax. So in spite of no education, he did make it pretty good in life.
Did he ever talk about his parents?
He didn't, of course, his dad died before he was born. Yes, he loved his mother. She had a little house not far from then, and the kids would walk over there and she'd show them all the little goodies she had and that she saved. And she was married 3 times, and she would name all her names and said they were all good men. But I don't know how old she was when she died, but
Did you ever meet her?
she had just died right before we married, so I never met her. Mm-hmm.
Did you hear other family members speak of her?
She loved Neil. He was the one that would walk up and down the hills and out in the country to see her, and she would cook for him, and he would sit and listen to her stories and things.
And she lived here in the area, like in
She lived around New Harmony.
New Harmony, really?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Wow.
And she walked down her back steps one day, and a copperhead bit her on the leg. And they called the doctor, and he cut her leg open, cut the head off of a chicken, and put it against her leg. That's so it would draw the poison out.
Did it work?
Well, she didn't die, but her leg was swollen the rest of her life.
Wow. How old was she when this happened?
I have no idea. Older woman.
Interesting. Wow.
But she raised a big family. No running water, no lights. Back then, nobody had them. But they all survived.
What about, can you tell me more about Charles and his relationship with Neil? Did Grandpa ever talk
Oh,
about?
we would go over there, and Neil got a new revolver, and Pop Holland, Charlie had one, and they would get out in the yard and have quick draw contest. I don't know who won, but they were always wanting to have quick draw contest. And their entertainment was sitting and playing checkers and dominoes.
What is some of the things that?
He'd take the grandkids fishing down at the
Okay.
river. I remember going with him a few times. Yeah. He had 3 children and then waited 15 years and had 2 more. So in 1 year, his son had a child, his daughter had a child, his other son had a child, and his wife had a child. We had 4 babies the same year.
Oh, wow.
So they were still having children when their grandkids were born.
So did Grandpa had a good relationship with Charles, or?
Oh yeah, yeah. He loved his dad. Yeah. They would come over here and we'd play canasta, and we'd go to their house and play canasta, and we'd go to the drive-in movies. They were still young enough. They traveled a lot. They went to the Smoky Mountains. We'd take a tent with them and camp out for a few days and come back. So I remember he bought a Studebaker, brand new Studebaker, and it must have been in the 50s. And you couldn't tell whether you're coming and going with that car. It had, the ends were pointed. He loved that old car. I mean, it was brand new, but it was original.
And he, besides going up to Michigan to work, he pretty much stayed in the area for his whole
After
life.
that, when they came down here, um, things started booming here. They built an atomic energy plant here because of the dams and a lot of chemical factories. So he had a lot of work down here later. And both of his boys worked for him in the paint industry. So, but he always thought that he was Indian, but we've found that he wasn't. Their DNA shows that they're from North Africa. What is that country? It's not Egypt, it's further. That may be where they got their dark skin and dark hair.
Now, who took the DNA test?
Sandy,
Sandy did.
uh-huh.
Okay. What about Vicky?
She won't take it because she says she doesn't believe it's right because she wants to be Indian so bad. But she,
Oh no.
let me see. I can't think of much else. He had a temper. Everybody sort of scattered when he had a blow up. But he lived in a stressful age and a lot of worries, so you can't blame him. He helped organize Sharp Baptist Church, and him and his son started the Pleasant Valley Baptist Church. So he was very involved in church. As far as his childhood, I don't know that much more about it.
No. Okay. Okay. Hmm. No. With did Grandpa get to interact with his aunts and uncles, or did they not remain in the area?
You talking about your grandpa,
Hmm.
Neil?
Hmm.
We were very, very close to the uh, his mother's side. Were still here, the aunts and uncles.
Okay.
We would after church we'd go to their house and they'd have 3 or 4 big tables set and everybody in church would come and eat. That happened about every Sunday.
It was like a potluck.
Yeah,
That's nice. That's good.
lots of homemade ice cream and the whole thing. And when we married, I was a 16-year-old little girl, homesick, and his mother didn't like me, and so I spent a lot of time with the aunts and the uncles because they were so good to me. We'd walk 5 miles out there to stay all night with them, and it was so strange because I was a city girl, and they had water from a well, and the beds were made out of straw tick beds, and they would fluff them up, and we'd lay in them, and then they'd fluff them up again. They were so poor. Well, occasionally somebody'd have a feather bed, but mostly it was straw mattress.
Oh wow. And where was this?
Benton, just out of
It's in
Benton,
Benton.
between Benton and Simpson, and they had fireplaces, and we'd popcorn and sit around the fire, and the men would love to tell old stories about ghosts and leopards, panthers, whatever. It was just a good time, good time. And most all the old ladies chewed tobacco, and they'd spit that tobacco in the fireplace. They wouldn't smoke a cigarette; that was sinful. But they chewed tobacco.
Interesting. So chewing tobacco during that time, the Baptist Church didn't consider chewing tobacco sinful.
I don't know if they admitted it to each other or not. Maybe it was. But I always thought that was peculiar. All those old ladies, they'd talk about how terrible it was to smoke a cigarette and chewing tobacco be running down the corners of their mouth. Oh goodness,
So they're really country.
very country.
I see.
Oh yeah, wonderful, wonderful people.
Now, have you what do you know of Verna May? You don't know much about her?
No,
Sexton.
the only one that would know would be Gladys. Is about the only one left, and that's oh goodness,
But you know of her, right?
yes.
Oh, okay, okay.
I've heard her name, but they lived in central Kentucky. A lot of them did. And then when Neil and I married, 2 of the sisters lived in Wichita. And so I got to meet Charlie's. That's how I met Neil. He lived in Wichita for a while. So did I.
Really?
And his parents lived there.
I mean,
And
okay.
my sister and I lived in an apartment building in Wichita till my folks bought a house. And I walked about 7 or 8 blocks to downtown Wichita to the Woolworths where I worked. I lied about my age, told them I was 16. And I walked out on the porch of that apartment building, and this the cutest guy I ever saw painting our porch. And I said, "Good morning." He said, "Good morning." Well, little did I know, 70 years later, yeah, he came back 2 or 3 times and we met, and he took me to the drive-in theater that first night. And the first night we dated, we sat and talked till 2 o'clock in the morning, I guess, in his 42 Mercury convertible. Oh, was it snazzy? And he said, you know, would you marry me? And I said, you're just silly. You don't fall in love at the first date. So the second date, I said, yeah, that's how quick it happened.
It's beautiful.
Love at first sight. So 6 months later, we married in my aunt's living room, and the family was all around us. And soon moved to Kentucky, and the rest is history.
And before that, you've never set foot in Kentucky.
I didn't even know there was hardly a state of Kentucky, no.
Oh boy.
Mhm.
So was it a culture shock coming down
Oh,
here?
wow. Yeah. Like I said, I was a city girl,
So
and
you
this was strictly hillbilly land, and proud of it.
you walk. so
I walked back in time 30 years. That's what it was like.
So did any of the folk around here when you moved here, did they think of you like a snobby city girl?
Oh, yes.
Oh no.
Oh, not the aunts, but his mother and father thought he should marry a Kentucky girl. See, I was not only a Yankee, I was not a Baptist.
You weren't?
No, I was raised Nazarene and Methodist,
Okay.
mostly Methodist, was grandma's was. So I was a devil's bride, you know, almost. I was, oh, terrible. How did Neil ever get mixed up in somebody so bad? But before it was over, they learned to love me. What's not to love? You know, it took time, but it was hard.
It's beautiful.
Then we had 4 kids, like shell and peas, pow, 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 pow. The fourth one Sandy wasn't 5 yet. I had 4 in 4 years.
My goodness.
And back then, these macho men never changed a diaper, never washed a child, never fed a child, ever. Mm-mm. And his family was still having kids, so I didn't have any help. I didn't have family here. I survived. A little bit dingy for it, but I survived.
You didn't get any help
None
whatsoever?
from nobody. No,
You raised 4
I raised it by
children
myself.
by yourself.
Hmm.
Wow.
And we rented houses with wells that I had to draw the water, wash with a wringer washer and hang them out on the line. But everybody did then. You know, wasn't all that hard. I was young, and no man
So
helped with the children.
Is there a well here on this property?
No. We had to run the water when he came.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how old were your children when you guys had this? This is your first and only house you guys lived in.
Yeah, we lived in California. We lived in Kansas, Washington State. Sandy was born in Washington State.
Really?
See, we moved around.
Oh, okay. Well, wow. I didn't know that.
We lived in Pomona, California in the 50s.
What brought you guys out there?
My folks moved out there, and they ran out of work here. We just thought it was a good adventure, so we went out there. Then we moved down to San Diego.
Did you guys like it out there?
Oh, yeah.
What made you guys want to leave?
Right on the ocean. We finally got homesick. Neil probably got homesick for Kentucky.
Just wasn't like home, huh?
But every weekend we'd take off and go someplace. You know, it's an adventure. Yeah.
It's
Good fun, good time. Oh, Sandy got old enough to start school, and we didn't want her to start school there.
Was it kind of liberal out there?
Well, I don't know about that, but they were already arresting people. We lived close to Mexico. Drugs and stuff had already started back in the 50s there. And
Really?
we just didn't feel real comfortable sending her to school. We knew it's a good place to raise kids. But we lived in Washington first couple years. We lived here a few months, moved to Washington where I was raised.
Mm-hmm.
For a couple years, and then moved back. We just moved a lot. Like I say, it was adventure. Fun.
Now, was Grandpa a Mason?
Yes, for a while.
What made him stop?
he just didn't feel right in it. We just didn't feel comfortable. He didn't say what good it would do, and expensive, so he just dropped it. He didn't have anything against it, for or against. He just,
really? Just didn't really see any use out of it?
most all the men here were at one time. But it's just a club. And he said, no, I don't have time for that.
Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Can't think of anything. I'm trying to think. That's a while ago.
Is there anything that you feel like you should share, but afraid that people might take it the wrong way?
So you want some good old juicy gossip?
Oh.
I can't think of any.
No, not necessarily gossip. Just like something truthful that, would make our descendants think, something for them to, bite on, for wisdom.
I think we have all taken for granted that we can jump in the car and go to any state and come back and live where we want. That's a precious freedom. And more we're getting to where we think, well, we want to keep that freedom.
Mm-hmm.
My parents lived in Kansas, so they came here once a year. And usually at Christmas time, we had a wonderful time when my folks came here. And then we'd go to Kansas in the summer and visit them. And I had one sister, and she had 3 children. My sister was an alcoholic, and she gave one of her children away at 3. And we didn't know what happened to her. That was a very sad time for us. And so when her daughter Gloria got a little older, she found the sister. So they got back together when she was in her 20s. And she came through here and saw us twice. But she just died of breast cancer last year. And Gloria, my sister's other daughter, was also an alcoholic, and she died of liver disease at 47. My sister committed suicide at 47. So
Why? What?
she was just too many booze and alcohol, drugs and alcohol. She just gave up.
You think maybe it was depression that drove her to alcohol abuse?
She was always depressed about something. We didn't know why. What?
Interesting.
Yes. And
so it wasn't like an abusive situation?
No. Well, this is not funny, but she married so many times that she quit getting divorced. She couldn't afford a divorce. So you just married somebody else. So when she died, we didn't know what her name was, so we just picked one of them that she liked. I mean, it's not funny, but that's her. She would have laughed about that. She'd say, okay, just whatever. So now she died too young, but she was not a happy person at all. So she just had one child left, Alan, and he died this last year. So
how many siblings in total? How many siblings do you have in total?
Oh, just that sister. That's all.
Just you and one other sister?
Mm-hmm.
That's it? You didn't have any other siblings?
No, just my sis and me, and she died in...
Your parents didn't have any more kids?
No, just us 2. So that's why I'm pretty much on my own.
Interesting. How are
I was
they?
the only child for years and years.
You were an only child for years? Oh,
After
okay.
her sis died. And she was always off in some other state. I never knew where she was.
Was this before contraception? How were they able to?
Mom had surgery when I was about 3 or 4.
Really?
She had a hysterectomy or something.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me more about your...
But they didn't want any more. It's depression. It's all they could do to
Oh,
feed
yeah.
us.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right. Forgot about that.
And then the war, and we always raised pigs and chickens and rabbits and stuff to eat during the war because you couldn't get meat. So we survived.
Yeah. Um,
During the war, we were so patriotic. I was in grade school, but we would gather up cans and take them and, scrap iron and everything to give for the war effort, which was necessary when they made all. My daddy worked in an aluminum factory, so he was deferred from the service because they made airplanes with aluminum. So then he got a little bit too old to be, got in his 30s. So, yeah. But I was a Japanese airplane spotter.
really? Here?
We lived on the ocean, and the Japanese were going to bomb us next. We lived really close to the ocean out in Kelso, Washington. And there was a big, the next city over was Longview, and the big ships would come in, support. So the Japs would naturally bomb us. I know it's supposed to be Japanese, but they were acting like Japs. And
Isn't Japs just short for Japanese?
Japanese. Now it's not proper. Anyway, they got people from town to volunteer to get on top of the courthouse and look through, what is it, glasses,
Telescope
spyglass, telescope
or binoculars?
for airplanes. And every time a plane over, we'd write it down, and we had a sheet of planes. We identified them, and if it happened to be the wrong plane, we'd call them in, whatever. We were just kids, but we were part of it. So we helped Mama do that.
Wow.
And they had dirigibles. You know what that is? Looked like blimps.
Oh,
Only
yes.
smaller, and there were wires all up and down the coast to catch the airplanes that they came in to bomb us.
Did that ever
And
work?
well, they never got. Some submarines got some bombs in San Diego or San Francisco or somewhere. We didn't hear about that till after the war, so they didn't make that far. But all of us kids had to wear our name tags around our neck in case we got killed or lost.
Oh, wow.
That's how scary it was out there.
So how long were you living in Washington during the war?
The whole war.
The whole war. Wow.
Yeah. We were just in it from 41 to the summer of 45. But it was a big part of our life.
At what point during the war did you notice that the tide was turning, and that you could kind of breathe a little easier at home?
My parents might have known that, but we were scared to death. They said, "Don't be afraid," but we heard them talking and heard the radio. So not till they declared peace in 45, the summer of 45, everybody went to town, and it was full of people dancing up and down the streets, doing the conga lines and all that, and just a wonderful time. But I walked over to my aunt and uncle were standing against the wall there, and they weren't happy. They were just standing there looking at us. And I said, "Aren't you going to celebrate?" And they said, "Our boys over there, the Japanese hadn't surrendered, and their boy, my cousin, was still fighting. I guess Germany surrendered first. I don't know, but it was just a few days till. But it hit home. All the cousins were over there. We didn't lose any, but they came back shell-shocked and in bad shape. But you don't forget something like that when you're. So I was 12, 11, 10, 11 when it was over.
Oh, wow.
No sugar, no candy. See, we didn't know it was good for us. We thought we were being deprived.
Thank you for sharing. It's really beautiful.
That's part of history that's going to be soon gone.
Yeah.
And our soldiers, very few of them are still alive. They'd have to be in their hundreds now. But you know, I'll be at 90 in 3 years. I wish I could rewind it and do it all again.
Really?
Yes, if I could go there. Not right now. Not in 2021. If I could go back to 1934, I would love to do it over again. Maybe not made the mistakes I did, but I'd probably make different ones. So
What mistakes?
I had a wonderful life.
What mistakes would you have changed?
Gee, I don't know. Probably waited till I was grown up to get married instead of a baby, but I'd want the same man. My childhood, I was going to sock hops and dancing and going to ball games and riding the bus to ball wave game, and then I was married.
Ball and chain.
Ball and chain and getting water from a well, and so poor. One time he was out of work. I don't mean to sound sad, but this is true. 4 little kids. All I had was a sack of flour and some lard and powdered milk. We lived on that for 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
I had frozen okra in the freezer. Got sick of frozen okra. But I could make biscuits and gravy, and I could make pancakes, or just,
Wow.
we survived. And I wouldn't tell my folks at all. And went out, and I think we prayed that day, and went out the mailbox, and there was our income tax check came in, like a couple $100. And bang, we went to town and put everything in sight. Oh. And that's the year that they repossessed our house and our car.
The IRS? What?
Well, no, the
Oh.
landlord and
Oh.
the car dealer.
Mm.
And so we
Because he
borrowed.
lost his job.
Yep. He was out of work, and it was seasonal, and in the winter there wasn't any work, and he built houses. So we went to the loan company, borrowed $300, got a car in town. We didn't make it home. The motor blew up on the way home. So I think we had borrowed his dad's car to get to town to get a car, and so he had to tow that old junker in. He went out and he got under a tree and winched that motor out of the car and put new whatever. Somebody had doctored it up with tin can or something to keep it going. Have you ever heard of that? Anyway, he fixed it, and we survived and found an old place to rent, and he found work.
This is in Washington?
That's here.
Oh, here?
Mhm.
Okay. Wow. Is this your first year of marriage?
That was 57. That's after we moved back from California.
Okay. This is with the kids,
So
too.
see, all 4 kids. We
Yeah.
know our times.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't forget that. But it teaches you to appreciate the good times.
Yes.
I flip on that very seldom, that I don't flip on that heater, the furnace. Then I say, thank you, Lord. I don't have to go get out in the cold and get a bucket of coal and make a fire. That was hard. Have you ever had to do that?
I don't think so.
We had a big old coal stove here, and it'd get cold in the morning. We'd have to go chop the ice off it and start.
No, there's a growing movement of young people going out in the woods and making a living, scratching a living out for themselves. Good old fashioned hard way.
Well, if they want to do that, good for them.
Yeah.
I'll just take the lazy
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, they're learning, because you're right. We've been spoiled here.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. I remember telling Elizabeth how, when I was a kid, we didn't have no cell phones or tablets or nothing. So, because we were watching old home videos, mom sent us mom gave Elijah all the home videos. They're on VHS, and I told mom give them to Elijah. He'll give them to me, and I'll digitally copy them. And so I did, and then so we're sitting down watching one of the videos where we're in the van, we're going somewhere, and we're all just talking to each other constantly, making just a whole bunch of racket and just nonsense. We were entertaining ourselves because we had nothing. I mean,
You were kids?
yeah, yeah, we were kids and we had nothing. We didn't have tablets or nothing. And I remember turning to Elizabeth, telling her, "See, we're playing here because we don't have anything. We don't have tablets or cell phones to keep us entertained or watch movies on. I mean, that was unheard of. So cause she's sitting there wondering why we're doing all that foolishness in the car.
Wow, you actually talking to each other.
Yeah, we're actually talking to each other, carrying on, just being kids, just
Hmm.
making a bunch of racket. And
Don't you think we've lost a lot?
yeah, yeah, you know, everything's constantly changing. Nothing's ever the same, and
Mm-mm.
it'll be different for her too.
Oh, roll with the flow because it's not going to stay the same.
Yeah.
People come and go out of your lives. So that's a constant thing too.
Is there a person in your life you've always wondered what happened to them? Like a friend or an acquaintance or someone that's kind of been popping up in your mind every so often throughout the years that you're like, I wonder what happened to them, and you never knew, never found out?
Can't think.
Like a long
A
lost
lot of
friend.
school friends. Teddy Cole Baba was my love in the seventh grade in Calama, Washington. I heard he ended up being a preacher, but he's probably gone by now. Men go before women usually. Um, I can't think.
So what about your parents? What about their backgrounds, where they came from? Like, what was your dad's home life when he was a child? Did he even talk about his childhood? And what about your mother? Did she talk about her childhood at all?
Further back than that, Mama's uh, grandparents were in the Oklahoma land rush when they had free land in Oklahoma in the 1800s. And my dad's parents were in that same land rush. And so they got, I think it was 120 acres. It was a section, whatever it was, in Oklahoma, free if they build a house and improve land. And uh, that's where mom and dad met.
So they're
They had dugouts. Daddy was born in a dugout. That's just where you dig the dirt out and layers of the land. You pile it up and then put boards on top. And seldom had windows. And Grandma said that the rats and the mice would chew their hole through it, and then the snakes would follow them, and then the bigger animals. So it was a constant fight to get the holes covered up. So they lived in there till they could build a house.
oh wow.
So,
What
and the Indians came over and they loved Grandma Heron's cooking, so they would come and swap, bring them rabbits and stuff to cook, and then she'd cook it, and then kids would play together.
When was this?
in 1800s, 1870, 60, 70.
Wow. Oh, your
Um,
mother's parents.
My mother's parents, my dad's parents.
Okay.
My mother's grandparents and my dad's parents were old enough to be moms.
This is so shortly after the Civil War.
Yeah, somewhere in the late 1800s, yeah. So she was born there. Yeah, her daddy's grandfather and his brothers all fought in the Civil War. Now, I've got papers that show where they sent for
Pension.
pensions and stuff, but I never did figure out which side. Somebody that knows would know whether it's north or south. But I think it was Indiana, but Indiana was both. Wasn't Kentucky
Kentucky was
neutral?
neutral.
So you got some on each side. So anyway, that goes back. So grandma and my dad's father always had a business of some kind. They had the first store in, well, can't think of the town, Crawford, Oklahoma. And they had upstairs, they had everything from caskets to food and whatever the pioneers needed. And grandma said she went up there one day to hang out the wash in the wintertime. And one of the boys jumped out of the casket, scared her to death. Just to be mean, you know. She ran down the stairs screaming. But this, I think's funny. They had a bulldog, and he was mean. And so when the Indian kids came over, they said, "We got a dog. You want him? Yeah, yeah." So they swapped something because they knew they'd eat that dog. Yeah, they ate dog.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm. And when Grandpa went over to them to see them about something, and they had soup, and he started eating, and he said, "Dig in the bottom. There's dog in the bottom." And he said it didn't taste too bad, but yeah. Puppy in the bottom. That was it. Puppy in the bottom. That was a big joke with the family. We want some. That's a puppy in the bottom. But anyway, they said that the old saying, "Indian giver," is true. You swap with them, they'll come back and take it back. So you better bring it in the house at night and lock it up because, yeah.
Was this, what type of Indian was it?
Probably a mixture because they drove them there from everywhere. So I don't know.
Oh, wow, okay. So it was near Crawford, Oklahoma?
Crawford is near the Texas line
Okay,
over
yeah.
under the Panhandle.
And this is where they lived.
I've got a picture there of that. But that's touching history. I mean, I remember these people, and here it's 2020, and we're talking about hundreds of years ago. Time goes by.
Time marches on without us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have to make an effort to pass it along.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Do you ever watch the movie This Is Us? You might not get it, but it shows the parents and the kids and the grandparents and how their lives keep intertwining, how they affect each other. So my life has probably affected yours in some way.
Sure.
And your mama's.
Mm-hmm.
Then you'll pass on some of the things you learned from me onto yours, and so on. I hope it's the good things.
Nothing bad so far.
No. I may have a horse thief somewhere back there, but they didn't tell me about it.
Yeah, I've been spending a large amount of time doing a lot of research, but not just research, but documentation. Documentation and preservation. And because it's one thing to do the research and then put it up in a shoebox somewhere and then forget about it. And the next person comes along with it, don't know what it is, throw it away. You know, and so I've been trying to make it to where that doesn't happen.
That's great. That is great. I wrote a lot of what I just told you is in the little book I wrote of my life. And I just added, I thought, I don't have a lot of daddy in there. So is this still? Yeah. Probably wonder if I needed, but I didn't think so at the time. Daddy was a big man, 6'2". There was a lot of laughing, teasing, and joking in our home. He had quite a temper, so we learned when to back off and be quiet. Life must have been stressful for him and Mom. We were going through the Oklahoma Dust Bowl, the Depression, and the World War. I was a tomboy. I loved being outside, so I was Daddy's helping hand. There was just 2 kids, my sis Erlene and me. He loved to swim. He taught us how to swim and to float. He showed us how to make kites and flew them with us. He built us a child-size cabinet, which I played with for hours. One day he called me to come out and look at the cabinet. He had put a baby bird in it. He loved surprising us. I had a flair for making up wild stories to entertain them. He called me Wendy Margaret. You know what Wendy means? Wendy means, well, a blowhard. Somebody just...
Oh, hot air?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wendy Margaret. So it stuck. My cousins still call me Wendy. On Saturdays, the neighborhood kids walked to town to see the show. They called it the matinee. Westerns, cartoons, serials, and they were continued stories, the serials were. That's a lot for 15 cents. Daddy liked movies. Mama's church would not allow her to go, so Daddy took us girls either Saturday night or Sunday nights.
Wait, so your dad and
Mom,
your mom went to different churches?
he didn't go to church. And Mama was a Nazarene. They didn't believe in it back then. They wouldn't let her, so she went along with him. Daddy let me go salmon fishing with him and his friend. I didn't catch one, but what a thrill for just trying. He had this great big, it was something. We lived near the ocean, so we spent a lot of time there. We dug clams and had huge clam fries. His whole family would go, and we'd rent a big house and just fill it up with people. In 44, he drove in with a bicycle on the car. There were no bikes for sale during the war. Some boy had gone off to war and sold it to Daddy. He taught us how to ride. In spite of a lot of falls and scrapes, even put new soles on our shoes. They were rationed. We always got scolded for dragging our feet and wearing out our shoes. We had a long walk to school and the soles were made of leather, so no wonder. In spite of the grumbling, we knew it was an act of love. You remember, have you ever seen those shoe last? It's like this, and there's the shape of a shoe. Put your shoe over it and resole it.
They tap,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm. And they came with different size shoes you could put on them. One of my early memories was standing at a table on the back porch watching Daddy scrub the grease off his face after a day as a car mechanic. I can still hear the scrunching sound as he lathered up his face with the stubble of beard with that stinky lava soap. See, it's gray and strong, so get all the grease off. I also love to watch him shave. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Sometimes a nick and blood. Poor Daddy had to do that every day of his life. How awful. He was a restless man and we moved often. He traveled a lot. We traveled a lot. We made several trips back to Kansas and Oklahoma and California just to explore the country. He played the guitar. We had family get-togethers, sing and dance and eat, just good fun. He was a lumberjack for a while. I went with him to Yakima to get a truckload of peaches, and he sold them at his service station. You can see we had a busy, fun-filled life. Daddy died in 1975 at the age of 68. He was born in a dugout house in Indian Territory, Oklahoma. He grew up playing with Indian kids. Then he worked the oil fields. Thanks, Daddy. I just read this last week. I was going to add it to my thing because, that's memories that kids need to know. Okay. Yeah, I just added this later. Mama took us girls to church. A lot of the families had fathers sitting with them. These men were active in church. Oh, how I wanted my daddy to go with us. My fear was Daddy might go to hell when he died. See, Daddy's daddy was a Nazarene preacher, and he was so strict on all of them that none of them stayed in church. He was a tyrant, just like you're talking about. Yeah, he beat them, and Daddy said he remembers sitting in church, and Grandpa's big old wool coat itching him, and he couldn't even itch. He had to sit there, and he said he wouldn't go back to church. He just ran them all off again. Every night, Mama knelt down at our bed and prayed. Early would be on one side, I'd be on the other side, and she'd kneel down and pray our prayers. We always asked the Lord to save our daddy. One day when I got home from school, he had a broad smile on his face. He had accepted Jesus as his Savior. We were all thrilled and rejoicing. Sunday came, Daddy got all dressed up in his suit and tie. I can't describe the pride we felt to have our whole family in church worshiping together. He was a big, strong man, but he was also shy. When the service was over, the preacher asked Daddy to lead in prayer. I saw the shock on Daddy's face. No idea what to say. He was humiliated. He looked at Mama, and she stood up and prayed. Daddy never went back to church. That was an ignorant preacher. Didn't know any better than to do that. And that's sad.
I thought maybe the preacher was trying to humiliate him.
Well, he didn't know he was new. He didn't know he just probably thought he'd always been to church. But I told one of my friends, we had a visitor at church, and he's assistant pastor, and he asked me, I said, Bob, always ask anybody first if they mind leading a prayer in church. Always. He said, never thought of that. I said, you scare people off. And I've seen that happen other times.
Well, you saw it firsthand as a child.
Yes. And here's Daddy with his truck. No, that's not Daddy. I should pick that out of. That's just how it looked then.
That was a logging truck?
I guess. And that was his gas station and Mama's.
He owned it?
That's Daddy right there. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I did 1,000 dishes and made 1,000 hamburgers there, and I used to pump gas for him too. And in the back there, when Daddy and Mom would be gone, he'd hire teenage boys to run the gas station. So we'd get in the back room and shoot dice. And never let him know, but I learned baby needed a new pair of shoes and snake eyes and.
Wow.
See, what a terrible child. There's that bike he got us. And there's Daddy. And there's Daddy when he's younger, and that's how just put that together. So that's just what you're talking about, holding on to.
No, these are printed. Who?
Yeah, a copy. I've got a printer, yeah.
Okay.
Don't you think that's neat that I can just capture a little bit of my daddy?
Oh, yeah. These are
When
really
he was
good,
22.
too. Yeah, these you can get these.
Because most of the people here knew Mama, because she moved here after Daddy died. Oh.
Thank you so much for sharing.
You're not the only, what is it, soft-hearted. This That's your grandpa, your great grandpa.